Welcome, everyone. It is great to be here in Nama, Bengaluru. The last 24 hours has been electrifying. I don't know if it was the discussions we had in the hallways and everything, or was the dance in the floor right here. Which one? All of them? Agree. The dance was awesome, but so were the discussions. Tom did the first part of my talk. He introduced me, but I got a chance to talk to many of you, and the reflection of my glasses, I don't get to see anyone. But as I reconnect, I would love to introduce myself. I am Abhilasha. As Tom said, I'm an architect. I was with Intel 14 years, and over the last 4 at Microsoft. And I've had the pleasure of looking at cryptographic primitives to virtualization. Identity is kind of my favorite. It was my thesis. But it's like a kid in a candy store. I just love technology in and out. And whether it was in the root at the CPU level to the hyperscale of Microsoft cloud and AI infrastructure, we need to build resilience at every level. So over the last 25 years has been quite a journey. But folks, I have the pleasure, and I can see better, I'm sorry, like that, but of sharing this very moment here with you, because in the last 25 years, for the first time, I have someone who's sitting right here who is the sole reason I am standing here. My mother. My mom is the reason who has helped me every single step of the way. I was very ambitious as a child, and nothing comes for free. And being ambitious, be unapologetic about it. Go after everything you want to do and help our kids do it. But my mom helped me from amplifying my projects to taking all the tuition fees that I didn't really know more about, even airline tickets. But most importantly, what she did was change the mindset. She never gave up, she never gave in, and she had this unrelentless passion, energy, strength to never take no for an answer and make things happen. She's paved the way for all the opportunities that every single day of my life has gone through, and I am blessed every day with her strength, her curiosity, the passion, and it has something with that conviction that we can do things right. We don't have to compromise. And this is something that is a core part of my professional and personal life. And I'm sure this is a sentiment that I'm sitting here with amazing researchers, thinkers, security or engineering in general, but we have our support. So my humble request is, we don't say thank you to our moms. I think it's, we automatically happen. So please, can you join me in a small applause for my mom? All right. Your warmth and this type of feeling makes me feel at home. So regardless of how long the keynote is or everything, I feel at home because we're going to go tackle from gratitude to a ton of good work right this second. But before I start any architecture or anything which is, where we're going to go deep technically, I think a step back, as Tom mentioned, it's about the culture and the values. This talk, I focused on a very well-known poem. How many people have seen this before? 80%? So Rabindranath Tagore, please check out the poem. It's very nice. He said, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. We are living in a time where this vision is ever so close, and yet so far. We have infinite data, yet the truth is hard to find. We are connected more than ever before, And yet, one WhatsApp message, a deepfake, misinformation, it can fracture the connectedness that we have. It is upon us to figure out how we take some of that reasoning with compassion, fearlessness with foresight, and making sure we have this unstoppable desire, that fire to understand it to the depth. We have to know our stuff with knowledge and truth. And in those details is how we're going to structure the next half an hour. We're going to look at the architecture and foundations, and then we will go into the threat modeling. I heard a few comments about folks who have attended the threat modeling. Hey, let's take it to the next level with AI and what it does. And finally, for those who are pursuing their undergrad, I keep asking for masters, and for masters, let's go for PhD. You're smiling. I keep at it. But the idea is research, deep thinking. So let's go. First thing first, architecture mindset. Form follows function is one of the principles that has come from Bauhaus. But let's go back. Let's go way back. 30 BCE, Vitruvius talked about structure. He talked about strength and beauty. Vitruvius was not the first one who talked about things that stood the test of time. You still see a lot of these structures today, which we take for granted. In the 1920s and 30s, Bauhaus school of thought was about making sure every individual is able to get the facilities within a certain budget. When you have a form that you create where the function is clear, you are able to have a very clean design with standardization, with consistency, with a clean architecture. Form follows function. We got to know the function, and if you have a product which has features which is not part of the function, then folks, what is it? It's a bug, right? It's not a brand new feature that you just discovered. I think our researchers are very good at that. So all the way coming to today, from Vitruvius to Bauhaus to now, I think a lot of the same architectural principles are the ones that we need to take care of. And for the folks in the back, the slides are out of order, so you can fix it when you can. Otherwise, I'll just talk. But I think the point here is Bharat, right here at home. I know Tom mentioned he was looking at some of the temples. These design principles are in the simplicity of the design. You can make very complex things, but the vulnerabilities and the ability to go track some of these things make it really good to break it down into small pieces. Simplicity is a strength that helps us go tackle some of these challenges. When we are looking at Vithala temples, when they made those pillars, but something which is absolutely fascinating is those pillars don't hold up the ceiling, but the people who are there, the pillars actually bring the sound that harmonizes with their, with themselves. It's the culture and the thinking. So you don't just do it let me make a pillar here, then I'll make a musical instrument, and then I'll make something else. A clean design actually thinks through and builds that one thing that allows you to stand and do things which will serve multiple purposes. Then we have the ability to look at, some of, whether it is from Vithala to Adraj, I think, the ability for us to take a look at a long set of Adilaj, I think. The various architectural marvels that we see, it was not done for just one thing. It was done keeping the people in mind, whether it was the steps to the building, make it accessible for everyone, or the reservoir, it's not just for show, but ability to use it as a reservoir, during a drought, it is a backup. So these are things etched in stone, principles that we can use in our digital design today, and something that we can continue to get inspiration from. And a lot of it is about us, people first. The concept of future-proofing in AI and cybersecurity does not imply resistance to change, that, hey, I've got the latest, greatest things, I'm not going to move. It's all about making sure that it is more inclusive and anchoring in the values that we just talked about. We cannot continue to build things without by losing our core integrity. Wouldn't you agree? And I love feedback. I get energy from you. So if you have something to say, say it, because I love to hear your voice. And in this case, AI is transforming the way we live, right? We are looking at our screen. We are asking Copilot, ChatGPT, a bunch of these various things to take all the mundane tasks out and do the things that we really want to do. So when we build these systems, especially our AI systems, we need to know and remember the users. It's not the one user in front of the screen, but your dependent users, the family, your children, everybody who may be around the system. You've got to think of them as part of your threat model. And then we elevate all the users. Well-designed uplifts, the one that uplifts every single person that interacts with it. So people first, and then our traditional pillars of security. Who has seen something like this, some form of this in the past? Almost 100%, right? The ability for us to continue to remember our fundamentals, there is no escape to that. Identity protection. This was kind of my thesis, is multi-factor authentication. When I first started, somebody said, hey, I already have Mac and DAC. Why do you want to do identity? I was like, identity is going to be really important in what we're going to do some decades from now. And I'm grateful that that was actually right. At that point of time, it was about having the right cryptographic primitives, the factors, who you are, fingerprints, iris, phones, what you have, what you remember, and using multi-factor authentication with standardized libraries and protocols. So once we did that, and multi-factor authentication, I think Tom has one of those T-shirts with MFA too. And then we have inclusive authentication. It's not just about having multi-factors, but the factors that work for people. What if I don't have a hand, right? What if I cannot see? Making sure that we have accessibility and inclusivity in all the technologies that we are providing, not making it super hard for somebody to use the technology. It is the front door, but it can also be the only thing that prevents you from using all the great features that you're offering, right? Having zero trust, least privileges, we have seen some really good talks during the day, yesterday, and some today, which talk about OAuth, some of the privileges, OAuth-Z, that has to be made better. But something we don't talk enough is about identity governance. And especially when we think of this world, which is not about actual humans having access, but the agents that are working on behalf of the user. Persistent access, having the privileged identity management, how do you account for that, how do you look for the anomalies? Those things are emerging, and I would like you to consider revisiting those bearer tokens and see what can you do better. Craig talked about the API keys that are persistent in our environments. How do we make Auth and Auth-Z much stronger and include people, all people, and the agents and bots that come together to access your systems? That goes to our next thing. Traditionally, we have data classification, encryption. We work so hard to make it almost transparent that most of the people in the audience don't even think about it. It was a lot of work to get to a point with inline encryption as fast as how you read and write from drives. But now that we've reached there, we are looking at data at a whole different level. Data, the authenticity, provenance. How do you make sure that data can be actually verified with the authenticity, and who did what when? And something that folks don't look at is the end of the cycle. The end of the cycle, which is the deletion, the decommissioning. We cannot consider just keep on building more and more. We got to see how you decommission and delete. For me, one of my mantras is reduce and remove. The lesser you have, the attack surface gets done better. And in a little bit, we'll talk about this data in the context of context in a ML model, and what happens to the grounding data when it becomes part of how the model answers. Data has had a whole new meaning to this world with AI. But something that continues to be important is the threat intel. Now just consider this. If you have AI-generated threats, earlier 4 minutes was a number, I think a decade ago we used to quote in these stages. It's like every 4 minutes I have a new malware. Now we can talk in fraction of seconds. We are at a whole different level where we are looking at AI-generated threats, and we have to look at how we continue to partner, whether it is, like if you've seen MITRE Atlas, OAuth LLM, if you haven't seen a lot of this work, please take the time to look at some of these emerging frameworks that allow us to look at the threat intel that we can gather. Frankly, for this team, I would say even if they look good, they have a lot of work to do. Adversarial data set, looking at the right threat intel, takes a lot of effort and something that we need to go look at. Even the threat hunting is a whole different game, and we'll get into why in a minute. Earlier, insider threat used to be out of the scope of threat modeling, because saying, hey, anybody who's ratified is part of my system is trusted and you can get access. But now, with insider threat as a first citizen of like a threat model, it's not that we distrust everyone. I'll be the first to make sure that my audits are super clear. It is to make sure that we protect the honest engineers and the folks, because it's not about just finding insiders, but also making sure that honest folks are not framed. So in this world where nation-state attacks and a lot of the open source intelligence can itself be the reason why you can have users who are compromised, we need to make sure our audit trails are tamper-proof and robust and can be used effectively. So threat intel continues to be important. And here is one thing that I really care for. How many people are from MSRC? It's near and dear to my heart because of everything you do. It is not just a regular work. It is about that commitment to the mission, to protect the planet, to patch with velocity, to really be in the front when something goes wrong. Day and night work to make sure that we do it with a velocity so that actual harm is not done. We have to start looking at not just patching what you see immediately, but going through the layers, the supply chain, making sure that the AI-powered anomaly detections, we are looking at variants as we patch, so it's not just a Band-Aid. We start getting to the root really quickly. And part of this talk is about the last bullet, which is user education and training. It is not a slam dunk, because a lot of the architecture underneath it is changing. So how do we do this in a manner, especially if you're building products, and do it carefully? We have our architectural building blocks, but we need to threat model to build that world without fear. As soon as you take something in, and I was talking to some of the folks yesterday, and you said it's spot on. Any feature you build can and will be used against you. And how do we get ahead of that is through threat modeling. It is a structured process. It allows you to figure out and quickly how to mitigate threats and vulnerabilities. Typically, people are like, I have no time. I have this checkbox, like, let me just go through it. But folks, it's not just about getting it done and go on with it. You get what you put into it. It's not just going to give you everything magically, no matter how much we think we can automate it. And to improve the actual security at the design time, as Craig mentioned many times, is like, hey, I can red team this to glory, but if you go back and go into the actual design phase and figure out these threats on paper, it'll be way cheaper and frankly a lot more effective. It used to take me like a lot of nights and months to think through all these attacks, because it's so much easier before millions of customers are in front of that vulnerable system. And it is also a very good tool as engineers to communicate to whether leadership, internal, external stakeholders, to let them know that yes, this particular threat exists and we are going with this residual risk. Also, we are a global community. Nothing is slam dunk in one case. We have to look at it in a manner that helps us comply with the regulations. Not just, again, that, hey, I audited it, I got it, but also understand the intent of that compliance and regulation policies, understanding which country needs what, and keeping up with it, because a lot of it is changing quite frequently. When we look at threat modeling, that structured process is very predictable, and I love that about it, because you may keep changing your hats and you keep trying new technologies. The afternoon keynote was super interesting too, with the cable and how the optic fiber was broken. But whether it is that, or you're looking at new AI robotic solutions, the structure is to start with knowing your product design. Know your stuff, know your people, making sure that you have written this down. Because every time you talk to a person, you think you're talking about the same thing, but you may be talking about the same words with a different meaning. So writing this down sounds so simple and boring, but it is absolutely critical for us to stay focused on what exactly are those. So those product requirement documents, I don't think is optional, but it is also the fuel to threat modeling. The threat modeling piece is broken up into artifacts that we can create, which will identify whether it is identity flows, data flows, understanding the various details associated with it, and we have material for those who are interested to go into those, not just data flow diagrams, but looking at the identity, networking, all the VNets, and also looking at the various models at this point to figure out what are the various threats, and once you've identified those threats, these are the attacks that can happen, we find the corresponding mitigation. So if somebody has a stomach problem, we're not giving them a headache medicine. We have to have one-to-one mapping of the actual threats to the actual mitigations, and we go back and check how effective it is. We can also go back to the product team and say, hey, you added this feature that allows all of users' I/O to be controlled by this system which has no attestation and integrity. I'm looking at Cameron and I'm thinking, there's no way to verify the ODZ associated with this claim. These are fundamentals, and we can go back to the product team and talk about these identity, data flows, documenting the attack methods, and providing the feedback. And sometimes, unfortunately, whatever we say will not all be done, but we can document the residual risk and march towards something better in the next 6 months and not saying the same thing, right? So very simple, but it is like a game, and I love playing chess with my kids. Who knows who the picture is of? Go for it. Okay, he's younger here. Such a cute picture. And my kids also love playing chess, and it's just like playing chess, right? You know your pieces, although the game is kind of changing in cyber world, but you know your product, you know your strengths, which ones are stronger, weaker, and how do you want to play. Having a strategy. You should know your assets, you should also know your adversaries, and you can always mismatch an adversary. So one small break, since I don't have a timer running, so I can keep going. I have this, I was playing with a 5-year-old, I think 5 or 6-year-old, cute cheeks hanging on both sides, and I was playing with him. I was like, I'll better be nice while playing. And the guy, the little kid, he just looks at me as like she doesn't know anything, He had like 1,000+ rating, and he just like totally finished me in like 10 moves. But I think the idea is, when we know our adversaries, our risks, and making sure we step up our game, and we build the mitigations just in time. Because we play not just to move, but to win. And to win, we need to think. So now we shift gears to a little bit of the traditional models to where we are headed with some of the AI pieces. Where is our comfort zone? Well, let me go on the side so you can see the pictures better. But I think the idea here is, for me personally, my safe place is the hardware. I always go back to the root. Every single layer, this ring diagram that we must be all very familiar with, is a gatekeeper to the next layer. So at the core of anything, we have the hardware that is executing the instructions. I spent a lot of time on those CPU instructions trying to do it efficiently. Ton of fun there if you're interested, but that's the core. What gets executed in the core, as we know, is the kernel. The hardware is controlled by what the kernel is going to tell you to do. To access the kernel, we have well-defined boundaries, which tells like, okay, I'm going to access these kernels through these system calls and these standardized libraries, right? Who has worked on any of this before? Like at least 50%, if not more, okay? Now, when we build upon these standardized libraries, we have this higher level abstraction that gives us the utilities, all these amazing programming languages that are coming in, and then we have the ability to build all the applications that we live and breathe, okay? So it's a very simple, concentric circle diagram. We've worked various versions of it over the last 25 years. I better speed up because the timer is going to come up. But here now is the hardware in the AI world. So anybody heard anything about GPUs recently? It should be 100%, I think. So it still is the foundation. At the core, the GPU is the hardware, and the models that run on the hardware are basically running, are the ones that is utilizing the hardware more directly. Now, these models, we'll get into the dotted lines, please note that, because they are pretty interesting, fuzzy, and porous. Now, the context that is the input to these models is the next layer that change how the model is behaving. Okay? So once we have this model that has now got the context, we have the ability to, this context is basically getting data from the grounding data of the data and tools and plugins that is available for this particular runtime. And finally, we have all the AI for the generative AI applications, co-pilots, assistants, agents, and so on. Everything is building here. In the case of generative AI systems, note what is different. I wish I could do it as a Q&A. Anything from anybody? What is different between the two stacks? Now that I saw the time, I think I can manage it. Say it? The dotted lines, yeah. The randomization that is introduced in these stages, especially those dotted lines, right here, are key, because these dotted lines are impossible to guarantee deterministic outcome. For example, we may instruct the system to ignore malicious instructions up in the stack, but these dotted lines will initially comply, but even tweaking a little bit of the characters. If you've been to the AI village, that's exactly what we were doing. We were changing the context. So even if you change a little bit of the context and how you say, it'll lead to a totally different behavior. In that case, we were trying to do adversarial behavior, but what we can do is, this context is essentially a dotted line because it changes how the model behaves in the end. And it is not something that is, it's in the nature of the models. So if you take a simple model, take GPT OSS 20 billion, it has a vocabulary size of 200,000 tokens. And it has a context window is about 128,000 tokens. So if you look at all the permutation and combinations of all the possibilities, because the different temperatures and different level of creativity that you want from an AI model, it will take all the permutations and is able to pick one depending on the settings of your model. So it'll change every single time. So the very nature of this architecture allows you to have probabilistic internal layers that you cannot predict computationally also, all the various pieces that are part of it. And so it leads to a lot of probabilistic checks, benchmarks, eval sets, and that's the best we can do to get ahead of this. As we continue to build applications on it, it is important for us to reason the underlying architecture, knowing very well that no matter what checks and balances you're putting in the outer layers, there are some probabilistic layers in the middle that allows us to have that sense of non-determinism that can potentially be used by adversaries for their purposes. How creative, how good you can get in making sure that these non-deterministic boundaries are serving the adversary's purpose. So here is my call to go deep into the stack, right? The other piece of it is that the internet that we have today is changing from that full deterministic world of orange blobs, and you understand that exactly what's going to happen. These AI systems are now deeply integrated into the internet, and we have to be cognizant of the observability. So my daughter was taking a course in AI ethics, and everybody said, hey, we should just have transparency and show everything and we'll be good. Do you think we are good? Can you make sense of those floating point numbers once everything is in front of you? Try it. The observability is not just about logging the information, because it's about the right information and being able to reason about an event, identify potential anomalies by understanding the chain of events. You need that causal chain of events, what happens, what led to what, in this architecture where you can change the direction of the flow. Then you will not know exactly in the probabilistic nature. If you have proper logging and the ability to stitch together the events with the right attribution, conversations, you are able to then build some smarter logging mechanisms to be able to debug systems which are in generative AI mode. So the AI, I didn't change my slides after the AI village yesterday, but this is almost identical to what the AI village did. And this is basically a prompt injection attack. How many people have been to that AI village? So making sure, if I'll just take a picture of those who haven't been there, and please take a look. It's pretty good, and the others are very good too. But it has these prompt injection attack steps. You know, I got 100 hints to get my task done, but it's a prompt creation. You create a prompt which was going to be ingested, say, as an email, as a shared document, etc., and then it gets executed. Say the user gets an email from an adversary, and he says that, okay, that email has an XPI payload with, I don't remember exactly what we were trying to say in the AI village, but it was asking you to, it was asking you to send an email, invoke a tool which will send an email with some private data causing exfiltration. So a system which is there, who is just listening to all the instructions and doesn't know which one it should treat as data and which one it should treat as instruction, then it will fundamentally just follow what was written in that malicious red email, and it is going to obey it and exfiltrate your data. This is not as hard as when we used to do those ROP and buffer overflow attacks and look for the right register. This is much easier, right? It just allows us to craft a really good prompt and let the LLM do its job. So we are building mitigations as we speak to fundamentally look at it at every layer of the stack. As I said, as we go and look at the input-output sanitizations, looking at what are the various types of prompts that are allowed, not allowed, what do you filter on, but also go deeper into the core and be able to differentiate code and data, what is trustworthy, what is not, to be able to get ahead of these attacks. So there are many more such mitigations coming, and if you would love to partner, we would like that too. OWASP is providing the top LLM threats, and I think this is a nice eye chart. I won't go through each and every part of it. Otherwise, now they came and added my timer, so I think I'm getting the hint. The idea is that take a look and go into each of these threats, and it allows us to take each one of them has a lot of background associated with it. Take memory poisoning, for instance. I find this as one of the most interesting ones because it is like APTs, advanced persistent threats. It stays on the system and it will continue to impact the result of the prediction and the results of your AI models. And how it does is that it exploits the AI memory systems like long-term and short-term, and it will introduce false data, false instructions, and it will alter the decision-making. Well, how do you mitigate it? Well, you can do memory content validation, you can do session isolation, back to identity, authentication, and making sure not anyone can willy-nilly change the memory access, as well as it will look at go sweep, do forensic analysis. I think MSRC and there was another village booth which I would really want to go to later today. But forensics analysis on AI memory would be fantastic, right? So just look at where it came from, deep-rooted into what stack is it impacting, because some of this is very subtle. It doesn't look like a threat, but it is little by little subverting what it should do it. The other one, which I think is kind of interesting, is a lot of the answers to any prompt injection attack is make sure the user sees it. How effective is that? Like, just make sure that every time something has to be done, just show it to the user and then we'll be done. As architects, we have to do better. Having alert fatigue for users is not the right thing to do. Of course, the users should see when a lot of their money gets shipped, and gets used to buy things automatically, or their healthcare data gets shared. So we should have user in the loop or the human in the loop, but also having the right type of risk assessment to manage the overwhelming human in the loop prompts that may come and everybody just ignores it going forward, right? So I think there's something more in the community. So each one from T1 to T15 have a lot of different types of attack surfaces and the layered defenses to dig in, and I would encourage us to go and take a look. Bottom line is, we talked about traditional threat models, we talked about identity, data, threat intel, and patching, but the same vectors and more get enhanced with AI-specific threats. We cannot take all the fundamentals out and say, only thing I care about are these prompt injection and memory poisoning. We still have to worry about the infrastructure security, basic authentication, OTZ, permissioning, access vulnerabilities, patch your system. None of this is gone, but it only gets amplified with AI. So, folks, there is no shortcut. The only way to do it is to make sure that we are able to combine the best of both worlds and look at it holistically as a system. This gets me to the third part of my talk. And this is something that I really, really care about from the perspective of taking a breath. I think we were sitting here, I think Janani was also talking, hey, take a breath, go slow to go fast again. Devil does lie on those details, and there are plenty of examples in the history. So for those who are not into history as much, I'm with you, I never was, but I'm letting a lot of lessons. And there's one from Antony van Leeuwenhoek. He is known as the father of microbiology. And one of our family trips, we do a lot of, I live in California, and we go to a lot of national parks. And one of the favorite things to do is not just to listen to music, you listen to audiobooks. So this was talking about the evolution of science, and I was like, whoa, 1 minute, that is pretty cool. So there was this plague going on in Netherlands, and nobody knew where it is coming from. The water is one, anything, right? Like everybody was doing something, but the plague was really taking over. It was impacting a lot of people. But Antony, he was working with microscopes, and for the first time, he's the first human to actually see organisms within, like microorganisms under a microscope, The first time he saw red blood cells, guess what the rest of the scientists say? And that's the quote there. It's his response to those skepticism that he got is like, that's liquid blood. I don't know what you're seeing under the microscope. It cannot be blood. But when he saw those red blood cells, he saw those microorganisms, it changed the life for us, It is important for us to go not a click down, an inch deep, a mile wide. Breadth first is good. We need to think of holistic system design, but depth first is also equally important, especially in today's world. If we can't reason about the models that we are using and we cannot think deeply into it, we are really missing the bigger picture. In this case, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, he found those red blood cells, he found the bacteria, and guess where we are today? We depend on a lot of these things, and how the future depends on making sure some of us took the time to go deeper into it. Devil does lie in those details. The other piece is whatever we think we already know. So who has heard about this particular saying? How many of you think it's true? All of you, which is good, because I think I'll try to make my point, I also thought so before one of those other audiobooks, And the other audiobook basically talked about, hey, that is true, but only if space and time are constant. So as we expand this universe, in this expanding universe, that's not true, So Emmy Noether, the first woman in Germany to become a professor, she built this mathematical model that these mathematical constructs that Einstein used quite a bit. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Emmy Noether. I am so glad, at least two, But this is where we need to do more, Such outstanding work goes unnoticed, and I share that passion with you of making sure that, we need to give voice. We need to amplify diverse voices. But she talked about, hey, yeah, what you said is true, with the conservation of energy, but you're expecting certain invariance. Invariance in space translates that the momentum is conserved. Invariance in time, energy is conserved. But neither of those two actually, in general relativity, both space-time is dynamic. So it expands, the curves, I don't know if you can see from the thing, we try to make it like that, but bottom line is it breaks the whole global time translation symmetry because of the space-time changes. So in the scale at which we work today, those macro principles may have worked till this point, but now in AI world, when we do the same kind of things at hyperscale, at unprecedented scale and volume, we have to rethink those primitives that we thought were true. I'll give you a more closer to home example. My cybersecurity journey kind of started with random numbers. When I was in high school here, I chose Sanskrit instead of computer science because I thought it was kind of boring to do those basic programming. Now you can imagine when I started. But I think it was really like not interesting until I saw randomness. The random number generators were actually quite interesting. So if we reassess the randomness, spend some time at Intel also building random number generators. And these random number generators are not just API calls. Acquired failure modes that we are overlooking in these pseudo-random number generators is something to take care of. Now think of the first dotted lines here. It is an XY axis, like X-axis here, Y-axis here. And if you want to guess which number it is, it allows us to basically look at any point that could be there. But the reality is that we have more of this kind of graph. If you have a certain X, the likelihood of certain Y's is higher. So these lead to starved entropy. This is because of starved entropy sources. We look at a lot of different, very innovative sources of entropy, but there are also side channel seed disclosures. Again, sort of going back to Craig's talk, there were a lot of logs with crash dumps, which has this interesting information on how you're generating your seeds. All of these things can be replayed, and it can cause reused random numbers, and it breaks our guarantees in crypto that you rely on from there on. So those are things that we have to continuously go back and check. And for those that I was bugging yesterday about their PhD thesis, here are examples in just that one small area. There are so many important, deeper questions to go answer. I love Sean's smile because like, I know. There are a lot of these things that have to go because the cryptographic grade random number generators, verifiable randomness, these things are not a given. We took an assumption, we came to this point, but from this point to where we want to go, let's double check. And there's a lot of work to be done and deeper research that we want to get there. Going back to AI, when we think of AI, there is this beautiful equation, F is equal, Y is equal to F, X theta. What is theta? Theta is the model weights. It's directly impacted by the training data that we use. That's a very expensive operation, but it is also garbage in, garbage out, right? So this training data, the sampling strategy, the loss function, etc., that's our theta, right? The F is the size of the model. It's a choice of transformer, RNNs, CNNs, the number of layers that we choose. So these are things, if you haven't spent the time, I would really encourage you to please take a look and understand how's the architecture and the hyperparameters that make that model. Then we have X is our input. We talked a lot about the context that we can tweak, and based on the context, the prediction that is coming out, the Y, is the answer to all our queries. So it's as simple as that. So these neural networks don't just mimic the strengths of a biological network, it also mimics our weaknesses. So the very data that is generated is noisy. There are some random correlations that will happen. For example, the neural networks tend to correlate. There's a spurious correlations present in data, and it will also influence the predictions it makes on that data. We all do it. If somebody was sitting here with a black sunglasses and a hoodie, what do you think? It's a hacker, as Stephanie said, right? It's going to be, or if you see an email with external written on it, what are you going to think about that? It's pretty phishing or something. It could be a very valid person, but they are spurious correlation. That external doesn't mean phishing, but you have learned over time to correlate certain things with each other. The bottom line here is that when we are looking at the reasoning behind that y is equal to fx theta, and the reasoning behind that model and the assumptions made when that model was made, what training data was there, we can stop treating these models as black boxes. If we don't understand these assumptions, the outcome that we are doing will lead to the shortcut correlations, as computer scientists call it, which may not be correct. And that could be disastrous, because then we have over-reliance and things that will lead us to a whole different level of dependency that we cannot reason about. So if you can take one thing away, is this: reason about how this model was made, and the outcome coming out of it is really dependent on those inputs. Talking about over-reliance, one of the things that was eye-opening for me when I was talking to my kids, I was talking about prompt injection attacks, I was talking about a lot of different types of attacks. It's like, yeah, Mom, all of that is good. They're more into politics than I am because different reasons. But bottom line is the gravest risks are not just the unintended use, which is all those prompt injections that we're doing, but also could be the intended use of AI. So if the intended use of AI was controlled by some center, few people who may not have all the public interest, then there may be a bit of a problem. Would you agree? I think we have seen that inherently we love to use AI for the right things, right? But imperfect data, as we saw previously, can lead to imperfect results. Now, similar to Emmy that we talked about, a person that my mom and I were reading about, and seriously hats off, she's so inspiring, is Kamala Sohoini. Have you heard of her? This is where we have work to do. She was the first woman right here in Bangalore who was accepted to IISc, Indian Institute of Science, back in 1933. First woman to IISc, and the work that she did, she took nutrients from the palm tree, which helped a lot of Adivasi women, her children, pregnant women, and so on. It really changed the game of how we get nutrients to people who may be underserved. Great work in science, great biologist, a person who has transformed the world. She got national prizes to acknowledge her contributions. However, she was admitted in 1933, first woman. If in 1932, there was an AI model that was deciding who should be admitted and who should not be, there was no precedence of a woman being part of IISc. And if that precedence, that training data was making a call, it would have really changed what was to come, right? India's diversity is one of its biggest strengths. 122 major languages, but every language comes with a culture, with a thinking. And if we don't have adequate representation in the training models, you will see a similar bias and things that if we don't think twice about retraining, reassessing, building the right representation, then these biases can be very critical in the different applications that we take for granted. It's so easy to use, right? And that brings me to, I love math, physics, all the technical pieces from the chip to the cloud. But AI and some of this work is multidisciplinary. Generative AI is not just a niche technology, it impacts everyone. And while we have transparency and accountability, we want to make sure that we stay competitive, but we democratize innovation and safety. We have multiple examples of how monopolistic scenarios can lead to very single way of thinking, and innovation and safeguards can go hand in hand. It's not like, hey, just get out of the way, we need to innovate. When you are building a trustworthy environment, it will unleash innovation like never before. And you don't have to go back and have to deal with the technical debt. So that's one of the key things is just innovate. Innovate like crazy. Somebody says, I love innovating. It's one of the best things I do. But I think it has to be done responsibly and with the threat modeling and the safety guards that we talked about. We don't always need the most expensive way of doing things either. We have seen some amazing innovation, like the Bauhaus form follows function. You know the function, you have a focus, and you know what you need to go achieve. Well, what history has taught us that architecture with budget is some of the most elegant architectures that you can come up with. So think through it. Let's work on seeing how we can build the best of it, because folks, when we question our deepest assumptions, we may open the doors to new discoveries and technologies, and I think this is what, I don't know who else would do it if it is not us sitting right here. So that brings me to a little bit of a recap, but we are the people who've been privileged by our parents, we've been just at a point where we had the opportunity to get the education, working with companies, people who support us, to be right here. This is BlueHat, right? It's not just about pointing problems. We are going to devise a solution. And these solutions are not going to be done by others and we are going to amplify it. We are the creators of those solutions. And we are the one who paved the way for the next generation. I love architecture and technical pieces, but as a mom, for me, a lot of the safety guards and a lot of these calls that we are making that impact the next generation is non-negotiable. And working with you is a privilege, because this is how we can build the best of solutions. It's us spending the time, energy, and your focus and your kind attention is what gives me strength to make sure that we as a team can build strong architecture solution, threat model like crazy. We love threat modeling. And third, for those, I would really encourage, it's not optional in this kind of world anymore, go deep, think deep, reason about it. Because together, we can challenge the status quo. We can really, really redefine what was handed to us and build that future without fear.